Come on, Facebook. Sorry guys, I'm just waiting for Facebook. Come on, Facebook. Oh my god. So I've got to go all the way back and redo it. Being a bit pedantic about the title. Come on. And we are live. Well, I'm live at least. Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back with another video. This is take 2 on Facebook because the blooming thing wouldn't upload, being a pain in the neck. So I hope I don't have any other technical issues, preferably. But obviously I prefer to have as few technical issues as possible, as you probably can imagine. But anyway, I'm on Facebook and YouTube. And this is part 3 of my plans for empowering Native Americans on Thursdays, although it's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning here, so way behind schedule. I think I'll have to leave part 4 for another day, but I don't know I'll never get around to finish these projects. But I wanted to say in the intro some stories about my cat. So unfortunately, I'll say the negative one first. Obviously, I mentioned it before, but unfortunately, for those who haven't seen or heard those videos, I did lose, or we lost. And I say, why do they say the term lost or the late cat? But in this case, but we lost our cat or whatever. Basically, he passed away on the 5th of August. That's always going to be probably a date which is a negative date for me, but I'll try and turn it to a positive by thinking about some sort of charitable sort of thing in his memory. Panda, his name was. For those who didn't hear my previous videos, I've talked about in the past, so I'm really itchy. But my other cat, Minsky, I know I mentioned a story. We had 3 cats, me and my family, because I was still at home with my mum, a bit sad, but or very sad, I wouldn't. But anyway, we had 3 cats, and my mum gave one away because she said it was too difficult to look after 3, so we were left with 2. And unfortunately, Panda passed away. Now we just have Minsky. But Minsky, sometimes I put him on my shoulder, I bring him to my room, and he doesn't seem to want to go, and he seems to try to get off my bed and all that kind of. But now when I went to get my clothes for my shower, after my first shower, he walked into my room. He wouldn't want to leave, so I left the door open in case obviously he needs to go to the bathroom or anything else. But he stayed on my bed. So yeah, they're a bit fickle, I suppose, to say, or whatever the word is for the cats, whatever that word means. But anyway, I thought I'd say that little story. Another one I thought was quite a funny story, so I thought I'd go negative and go to a more positive story. It's nice that he wants to come in my room, but another thing is, he went outside. Well, actually, this is kind of sad negative, because this other ginger cat, my cat's ginger, all 3 of them were in his case, and I hope Colonel, his brother, is doing well. Sometimes they even mix their up and all that now and then, but his name is Minsky, this one. But I'm sure he misses Panda. He certainly did at the beginning, but I think he used to sit by his grave and all that. I did say I'll try and move to a more positive thing, sorry. But yeah, I'm going a bit off track, but this other ginger cat kept following him, and he kept hiding under a car, and I was like, hey, I was trying to be nice to the cat, but I was trying to say, leave my cat alone. But I was a bit worried about him in case he got into a fight. And then I don't know if he could handle this other cat, because he seemed to keep walking away from that. I don't know if that other cat's fat or quite muscular, but he's quite big. Could be fat like me, but he might be muscular. But because I think Minsky has very sharp nails, but claws or whatever. But so do most cats, I guess. Sharp claws. They're not too long, right now. Anyway, sometimes I forget to cut my nails, but I know I give way too much away. But anyway, yeah, they're not too long at the moment. But yeah, I brought him in, and one time, and I said recently, yesterday I think it was, or the day before. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was yesterday actually. And I said, I called him in, and he came in to see, and he seemed to sniff to see if he's got any food and look around. And then when he found he didn't have any food, he ran straight out. I thought that was quite hilarious. I thought that was funny anyway. But I'd love to know what you think as ever. And on that note, please let me know what you think about my videos, including this one, in the comments, or any thoughts you have generally about Native Americans, or whatever you want to comment as ever. Please feel free and welcome, in fact, to comment anything you like in the comments, either on Facebook, N8ive, or YouTube. And let's get to it. So these are pointers number 21 to 30 as per usual. So here goes. So number 21, as the saying goes, 21 again. I pretty much always say that one. Sorry for repeating myself as usual, but I'm a creature of habit, as I say. But I would love to find out about Native American and Native people from the Americas history and traditions and things like that. I mentioned that on Tuesday. So the same sort of thing I mentioned on Tuesday, given my use of patterns and things like that. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what we can learn about their traditions, like how they look after nature. I know I have my own flaws, like about hoarding paperworks and things like that, and I talk about my own weaknesses and mental health problems and things like that. So it's a bit of a dilemma because I like to keep papers and write on them in a certain way, and that kind of thing, and use certain notebooks for certain things and whatever. Talking of which, I was thinking actually, I think just as I got up when I went for my granddad nap, I was thinking about how, I think that was a time when I was thinking about like trying to think about what to cover in these videos, and I thought how I have different notebooks for different things, and rather controversially I have red notebooks that have a red cover. I think of like some of them I write like my ideas for AC Land, but I also want to write my ideas for like empowering Native Americans and Native people from across the Americas in those. And then in the future, I'd love to give them to Native Americans and Native people from across the Americas to say, this is like a gift for your community with my ideas and imaginations and things like that, which I hope will benefit your community. But I don't know if they'll be able to decipher my code, my punctuation, and my handwriting, which many people tell me is really bad. You might imagine I've heard it all, I've read it all, but basically, I've read it all, if I take it literally, rather than heard it all. But and sometimes heard people actually slap me off to my face. But generally speaking, they write things like, "Why would you write like that?" or "You talk a lot of rubbish," or whatever. Other things like a lot harsher than that. But yeah, I take it on the chin. I guess I am quirky, so I have to deal with being different, I guess. But yeah, going back to the point, I'd love to learn from Native American traditions and see what the world could learn from them. Basically, I think that'd be an interesting project. But what do you think? As ever, I'd love to know. Do you think it'd be interesting to learn about Native American history? I suppose the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad and the good, and like how they look after nature and things. I know that I mentioned like the ugly as well, and the bad as well, because people say, for instance, that Native Americans, a lot of Native American tribes used to fight each other, so they weren't as united as people might think, just because before the Europeans came or whatever. So it wasn't all rosy before, as some might say. But I hope to read from and hear different views, even if they are a bit controversial. Overall, I still hope to support and empower and uplift and just generally benefit Native people from across the Americas. I think that covers everything from point number 21. Maybe I could cover other things, but I'm going to leave it for now and move on to number 22. Talking about 21 again, actually, just before I move on to number 22, looks like I'm not going to get around to part 4 again, which has happened quite a few times, either due to technical issues or me sleeping too much or just not organising my time enough or whatever. But anyway, moving on, number 22. What could the future hold for Native people from across the Americas, and how can they be empowered? I know I talked about how whatever ideas I have for empowering Native people from across the Americas could also be applied for neurodivergent people, including myself, I guess, and for the Black diaspora and maybe other communities as well. But yeah, I wonder how they could be empowered in the future, like politically empowered, how they can get political representation. And I remembered something I was going to say in the intro, but I'll probably include that in point number 4. Keep saying that, but I was going to include it in part 2 and then 3, but now I'll include it hopefully if and when I get around to it. Ideally, in an ideal world, it was something to do with TV programs and the potential for a TV guide, but I don't know if the idea is that original, an online TV guide, basically, to put it simply. But I'm going to go into more detail, but I might leave that either to a part 4 or maybe towards the end of the video or whatever. Number 23, how can we fundraise to and just generally support Native Americans, Native people from across the Americas? How can we help them? For instance, like we could share ideas. Like I have the idea for them to network with each other and support each other and put their differences aside and all come together towards shared goals. The different tribal groups, just like I wonder, like with Africa, if they all worked together. I can't see Asians unite, but if they could, just imagine what they could achieve. Oh, I can't even imagine. I'm sure they could achieve a lot if they put all their differences aside, like their religious or regional or whatever other such differences. And similar with Native people from across the Americas. I think Asia could be, if they united together, I'm sure they could rule the world, really. I don't know if anyone should rule the world. I think we should liberate it rather than rule it and have less rules and less laws. Well, on that note, I know I talk about like privatization, the deregulation of industries, lower taxes. Even though I talk about supporting the poor, I just think it should be done in a free choice way rather than taking away people's choices. I know I have very controversial views, like about I don't believe there should be child benefits or child support. Very controversial, because I think that's a bad message from the government to say you can have children and other people will pay for it. Even like things like free meals or things like that should be given away, of course, but I don't want to offend anyone, but maybe charities or NGOs could come in and say, like, if kids are really poor, obviously they choose to be into that family, and if charities did more of their work, then we wouldn't have to force taxpayers or force people to do certain things. But someone, Corey Holcomb, who seems to say a lot of things I agree with, like how he says blacks should join the military and that kind of thing. He also talked about like how we can have so much money to give to Ukraine. With all due respect, no, I have no problem with. I'm sure there's some bad and good people in every country, but giving like 20 billion to Ukraine or whatever it was over time, so much money, and saying we can't help to build more homes in Britain or America or in other parts of Europe, let alone Asia or Africa or a place like that, I think it's a bit unfair. But I mean, he was talking about like how they've cut this thing called EBT or something in America. I don't know a huge amount about it. And if we have an equivalent, but like food stamps or whatever, and things like, I think like churches, there was something about a church that turned this woman away apparently when she said, have you got baby formula for her baby? And the churches say no, which I think is really unfair. They take loads of donations, and to me the churches should be amongst the top, if not the top, of giving to like homeless people and disabled people and disadvantaged people, especially like homeless and really poor people. Not saying you should just give people money without expecting anything in return, but I think that when the people are really hard up, in my opinion, charities, NGOs, churches and whatnot should be helping them. It probably puts the churches to shame, and maybe God will be angry with those people. I don't know. You'd have to ask God if you can, but well, maybe God can let me know if he's angry with those people. I hope he's not angry with me, but he or she, but probably. But in my case, or my dirty mind. But when it comes to charity, I always like to help others, but I just don't want to force anyone else to help others. Obviously, I don't want to be homeless or lose my own food. So if I take things literally, which I normally do a lot of the time, I wouldn't give all my money away, because like, obviously, what would I live on myself? What would I survive on even myself? So, but above what I need to live on, I'd give most of it away. Now, to be honest, I would give a selfish thing to a time football, so I'd give to my 5 causes, but I don't know if I should go into that right now. But I'd say I'd love to see what allies could do to support them. And I'd love for Native people from across the Americas to be able to own their own casinos and other businesses, and be able to have those things like owned private businesses that they can own, and network together, come together and support each other. And I'd love for them to be tax exempt, and also POC and neurodivergent people to be tax exempt actually, and maybe network. Maybe even some neurodivergent people can network with Native Americans and Native people from across the Americas. Obviously, some people, Native people from across the Americas, if they got tested for different conditions, I'm sure you'd find at least some of them would be neurodiverse. Statistically, probably about 10 to 20% or whatever, maybe even more, would be neurodivergent as well themselves. But even people from other groups, and also the black diaspora and POC, people of colour, supporting them. I'd love for them to be tax exempt. Again, lobbying to be tax exempt, and maybe even to monopolise. That's a really controversial one, I know. But yeah, look how we could fundraise to help more Native Americans to get into politics. Like, what could we do to help more Native Americans to have a voice politically, whether that's as politicians themselves, as lawyers, as lobbyists, and whatever else. So it'd be interesting to see what allies like myself could do, what we could come up with, and how we could support them. And on that note, again, as usual, I'd love to know what you think about that. And any suggestions, ideas, and suggestions you have yourself, please don't hold them back in the comments, or even if you disagree with me on certain things or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I suppose if it was like free meals, free school meals, extra call, child support, and things like child benefits and things like that. To me, if charities, NGOs, and people who choose to give them, like, even, I think what religious groups should do, I suppose like Mundas, Hindu temples, and Gurdwaras, Sikh temples, they, even though those religions, certainly Hinduism doesn't say much about charity, but strangely enough, they give away, as far as I'm aware, they give away free food, and certainly Gurdwaras do. I don't know what their religion says about charity and that kind of thing, but I think it puts churches to shame. And to be honest with you, I think churches should do more to do that. And in fact, it would be going on what the Bible teaches, as far as I'm aware, about looking after the poor. I know you should encourage people to do their best and try and work, and if they can, and things like that. That's the thing. I don't want to force the taxpayer to give like child benefits. So if anyone gives them, I think it should be like people who choose to do it, whether that's churches or other religious groups, mosques, churches, or whatever, or whether it's charities, NGOs, or whoever it might be. But I don't think it should be the taxpayer that's forced to pay for that. But that's my personal opinion. Moving on, number 24, I'd love to support, as I said before, as well, like Native people from across the Americas to have representation at the UN and international bodies like the UN or whatever other international bodies, so they can say, we want to be able to challenge like mining companies or whatever it might be, let's say, when they're against that kind of thing. Or even, I mean, financial support could be something where if Native people from across the Americas were given that financial support, they would not, they would be able to challenge mining companies or whatever. For instance, they would be able to say, they would even be able to outbid them, or they'd be able to buy the land so that other people couldn't buy it if they had that more money to afford. So you wouldn't even have to make more laws or anything like that, or challenge those mining companies in that way. But I suppose political support and that kind of thing could be something as well. Again, I'd love to know what you think, if you think I'm being naive. But I wonder if you think there's a way that more Native people from across the Americas, including America, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, and wherever else there may be. I don't know if there are any Native people left in Argentina, if I'm honest, or other parts of the Americas, or where they might be. But I wonder if there are ways, like the UN could say, we're going to reserve a percentage, whether it's 1%, 10%, 20%, or whatever it might be, whatever specific amount. They might say, not even such a rounded figure, they might say 5% or 7% or 6%, or whatever they think is a fair number, or that they would agree upon, or whatever number they'd be happy with, of Native people from across the Americas having those seats, even from Latin American countries and whatever, from all over the two continents or whatever. But also they could have allies, people like myself and other mixed race people, maybe going in and saying, actually, we want to speak on behalf of Native people. So even if they don't have that many numbers, they could have representation. But again, I'd love to know if you think I'm being naive. Hopefully I won't be too harsh, but I'll try and take it on the chin, as they say. Pointing to my chin, just in case you don't know where my chin is. Anywho, another one of my quotes, but moving on. I shouldn't say these inside thoughts, but moving on, number 25. As I say, I wonder how Native people from across the Americas could have more of a say, I would say, whether that's at the UN, or networking with the EU, even having a voice to work with, like even the EU. I know it's not in Europe, but they're not in Europe, but they could even have some delegation that they could take to the EU, just like India, China, and other people do, like the Chinese delegation to the EU or whatever. Having things like that represent them and represent them in, whether that's politically or in trade deals or whatever it might be. I wonder if there's stuff that could be done on that sort of way. And I'd love to know Native American and Native people from across the Americas' views on politics, religion, or whatever other views they have generally, especially on politics. For Thursdays, when I think about Thursdays generally, as well as like how they can set goals and whatever, which I talked about before. Number 26, a part of the reason to support them is for anti-imperialism, but I guess I was thinking like even things like Black History Month are quite political, I guess, in themselves, so to speak, for want of a better way of putting it. Number 27, they could. I talk a lot about like how they could not acknowledge and honour those who support them. So they could have lists of doing that. I know I talk about the Walk and Hall of Fame, acknowledging those who support them, their allies and whatnot, and supporters on YouTube, TikTok, and on websites and that kind of thing. Number 28, I wonder how they could turn negatives into positives and again have more representation in tech and other areas. And how organisations like YouTube, or businesses, corporations, or whatever, like YouTube, TikTok, or whoever, could support them a bit more. Number 29, I'd love to, for other people, including mixed race people, other POC, and people generally, including neurodiverse people, to let me know, or to let each other know and get involved in a discussion about how to support and empower and uplift Native people from across the Americas. And number 30, maybe they could get some tushy, totty, titties. Sorry, very immature of me, but anyway, I'm out. And peace and love. We'll stop saying inside thoughts, keep them in my head on that.